Hello, Carlinville Public Library investigators. It's Miss Nadia, and today I challenge you to find a piece of paper and make yourself a paper airplane. You ready? So pause it now, go get a piece of paper, and then let's make a paper airplane. So this is how I'm going to make mine. I always fold it long ways. Just like that. And then I open it up and I take one corner to the middle. And then I fold it like that. And then I take the other side and I fold it this way. Put it down on the ground. Then I've got it like this. I fold it back this way. And then I fold it down. So each side goes down. Just to the bottom here. And then I take the other side. And I do that again. And that is how I make my paper airplane. If you want other directions on how to make a paper airplane, you can go to theseasonedmom.com, and she can teach you many different ways to make an airplane, or you can make it glide, and you can experiment and see which one's best. So now that we made a paper airplane, how did you make your airplane? Would it be possible to skip the first few steps and start at, like instead of folding it in half, would I be able to just go straight to the corners and fold them in? I don't think so, because it just won't fold right and the sides won't be even. So it's important that I do one step first before I go on to the other steps. Last week we learned about Laura's wagon trip to her family's new land. And this week we will read my first Little House books, A Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And this book covers how they build their cabin or their little house on the prairie. And before we read it, we need to think about, because pre-reading's important, pre-reading activities are things that help us, or ideas to put in our mind to think about as we read, so we can remember important details of the story. So let's think about the materials and each step that her pa uses to build the log cabin. And each step was very important in order to make a sturdy house. So each step took a lot of time and hard work for the Ingalls family. Let's get started. So once upon a time, a little girl named Laura traveled in a covered wagon across the giant prairie. She traveled with her pa, her ma, her big sister Mary, her little sister Carrie, and their good old bulldog Jack. They were searching for the perfect place to build themselves a little house. So one day, after the little family had been traveling across the prairie for a long time, Laura and Mary woke up earlier than the sun. They ate their breakfast of cornmeal mush and hurried to help Pa wash the dishes, or help Ma wash the dishes. Pa was loading everything into the wagon. When the sun rose, they were driving across the prairie. There was no road to drive on, so Pet and Patty, the two gentle Mustangs, waded through the grasses. Can you imagine? Was it a smooth ride or kind of bumpy? Later that morning, Pa said, "Whoa!" The wagon stopped. "Here we are," he said. "Right here we'll build our house." Laura and Mary jumped to the ground. All around them, there was nothing but prairie. Right away, Pa and Ma began to unload the wagon. They took everything out and piled it on the ground, while Laura and Mary and Jack watched. Then Pa drove the wagon down into the prairie, out of sight, to get a load of logs from the creek bottom. Laura was a little frightened to be left on the prairie without the wagon. She wanted to hide in the tall grass like a little prairie chicken. But instead, she helped Ma while Mary sat on the grass and minded baby Carrie. Soon Pa came back with a load of logs. For days and days, Pa kept hauling logs. He made 2 piles of them, one for the house and one for the stable. When he had enough logs, it was time to build. Pa began the house first. Look at how big those logs are. All by himself, Pa built the walls of the house, 3 logs high, and then Ma helped him, log by log, and Pa and Ma built the walls higher and higher. Soon Laura couldn't climb over them anymore. Look at, and there's notches in those logs. There weren't notches before, but now there are, so that they fit together. Then one day, Pa was off hunting, and he came home whistling merrily. "Good news," he shouted. Pa had met a neighbor on the other side of the creek. His name was Mr. Edwards, and he was going to help Pa finish building the house. Then Pa would help Mr. Edwards build his house. So early the next morning, Mr. Edwards came. He was lean and tall, and he bowed to Ma politely. He told Laura He was a wildcat from Tennessee, and he could spit farther than Laura had ever imagined anyone could spit. Laura tried and tried, but she could never spit so far or so well as Mr. Edwards could. Mr. Edwards was a fast worker, and one day he and Pa built the walls of the little house as high as Pa wanted them. They sang while they worked, and their axes made the chips fly. They cut a tall hole for the door and square holes for the windows. Can you see all of the things they needed? Axes, and then they got like a ladle to get the water out of their bucket so they have something to drink. And look at the bulldogs watching them the whole time. Laura couldn't wait to see the inside of the house, and as soon as the tall hole was cut, she ran inside. Stripes of sunshine came through the cracks in the walls and went all across Laura's hands and arms and feet. So later on, they will have to find some mud or some other mixtures to fill in those holes. At the end of the day, Mr. Edwards said he would go home. But Pa and Ma said he must stay to supper. Ma had made stewed jackrabbit and steaming hot thick cornbread with molasses. Mr. Edwards said he surely did appreciate that supper. Then Pa took out his fiddle and began to sing. Look at the corn. See the cornbread? And there's some pieces of meat from the stew. Look at little Carrie has her little fork. Suddenly, Mr. Edwards jumped and began to dance. He danced like a jumping jack in the moonlight, while Pa's fiddle kept on rollicking and Laura's and Mary's hands were clapping together. Pa played and played, and Mr. Edwards danced and danced. They had a lot of work that they did earlier in the day, but they still had time in the evening, they had some time to relax and to enjoy themselves by dancing and playing the fiddle. So they did have some fun back then, even though they had to work really hard. So finally, Mr. Edwards said he must go. "Play me down the road," he said. So Pa played, and Pa and Laura and Mr. Edwards sang with all their might until Laura could not hear Mr. Edwards anymore. Only the wind rustled in the prairie grass, and the big yellow moon sailed high over the new little house on the prairie. And that's their house. All they have left is to put a roof and build some doors and put the doors on, and probably fill in those cracks in between the logs, and then they're ready to go. All right. Well, let's review how they built their house. Well, first, Paul had to go find a good stand of trees to find a wooded area, and then you make sure the trees are nice and straight. And then he had to cut down the trees with an axe. And sometimes they used a two-person saw to cut them. And they also had to take the branches off of the trunks. Otherwise you can't stack them like that. And then you had to load up the wagon with the logs and bring them to the site. Look at this, is an old time picture. Look at how long those logs are. Whew. Sometimes they have to cut them in half. Then, so they got them to the site and they stacked up the logs, and then they laid out the perimeter, which is like the outside wall of the cabin. And they had to make sure, they had to measure out those logs and find where the notches went so that they could put them together and make a nice, strong house. And finally, you begin to stack those logs to your desired height and see how they crisscross them. And that helps make them strong and helps them stay in place and not roll off the way they notch it. So some are going this way and some are going this way. And then of course they have some other ones going this way. And look at, they have one right here to hold those logs, because you can't really do this crisscross thing right here. Isn't that neat? And here's a picture of one of her actual homes. See, it has the crisscrosses in the corners. So it says build the roof and door and some shutters for your windows. But as you could see, they saved up their money and they were able to put in a glass window right here. There's a lot of steps to building that. Here's a picture of inside. And you can actually go visit this house. And see, there's some cross beams for the roof. The roof's a little bit more complicated. And then they put up there are some other flat pieces of wood. And they did put a floor in. And that's the hearth where the fireplace is. So then eventually you'd have to build the stonework on the outside for the fireplace. And that's it for a log cabin. There's another site that you can go to learn how to use popsicle sticks to make a log cabin, and it's at the site. It's education.com, and it's an activity. And there you go. So guess what? We're gonna make food. We're gonna make butter. So I showed you my butter churner, but I'll refresh your memory. The butter churner looks like this. It's like a big kind of like container. Let me take this thing out. And then they have this. And this helps when you put your heavy whipping cream in there or milk, you move this up and down, and it sloshes it into butter. And just the friction of the milk or the heavy whipping cream whipping around makes it turns it into a solid, and it separates from, and then it leaves a little bit of buttermilk in the bottom. So that's how that goes. And you just well, I'm going to use a smaller one because I don't need that much butter. So what I did is I put some heavy whipping cream in halfway in my mason jar. There are also 2 clean marbles in here, but I also heard that my father-in-law used a clean wooden clothespin and put it in here in the mason jar. And all you do, you literally fill it up halfway, put the marbles in there, and you just shake until it starts. And I started this up earlier, and it seems like room temperature cream makes it faster. So you can hear it sloshing. Slosh, slosh, slosh. And every once in a while you can hear the ping of the marble. And there I have directions here how to make butter. And this is on the Little House on the Prairie.com website. There you go. And it's really easy and it's really fun for kids to do. And it'd be really awesome and nice if you made some bread, homemade bread, to put it on. So I'm going to keep on shaking it. It's supposed to take it can take about 15 minutes or so, but we'll see how far we get. And then I'll show you what it looks like, because I kind of did start it up, and it is starting to look like butter. Shake it, shake it, shake it. Take it over here. And sometimes they had some butter churning songs that they would sing. But I didn't really see when I did my research whether Laura Ingalls did any butter churning songs. But I do know in the Appalachian Mountains, those pioneers or earlier settlers did have butter churning songs. And if you search that online and have mom and dad watch, because you always got to have mom and dad watch, because sometimes people list butter churning songs and it's not butter churning songs. It could be something else that you don't need to see. So make sure mom's with you if you decide to look up anything like that on the internet. I think I'm going to have you guys check this out now. Oh my goodness. So, oh geez. I have butter. Look at that. But I do have some buttermilk, as you could tell. It spilled out. There you go. Butter. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add some honey to it so it's like a honey butter. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Actually, I'm going to strain it because all that butter. So I'll do that later. But that's my idea, is just add some honey so it'll be honey butter. And so you'll need to strain it, or just you could use a slotted spoon and pull the butter out. So that is how to make butter. It's easy breezy. Just use some heavy whipping cream. All right, guys, that's it. I will see you next week. And we're going to talk about the county fair that Almanzo, who is Laura Ingalls' husband, when he's a little boy, his adventure of going to the county fair. All right, bye guys.